A cracked wooden feed scoop struck Cole Avery's glove. A hollow clack. Cold wood against colder leather. The mare lurched toward him, neck trembling, eyes dull from hunger. Snow tightened around Cole's knees, wind biting through every stitch. He pressed the scoop to her muzzle, heard the faint scrape as she tried to gather the last dust of oats. Cole steadied her draw, gentle, uncertain. A man and a dying horse sharing one small, stubborn breath of Christmas hope. The cracked feed scoop struck Cole Avery's palm again as he knelt in the drift, the hollow clack swallowed by the falling snow. The mare leaned toward the sound, muzzle trembling, breath a thin reverend of frost. She was too weak to hide it, too tired to pretend she wasn't starving. Cole pressed the scoop to her muzzle, feeling the faint scrape as she searched for anything, even dust. The sound was small, almost embarrassed, like an empty cup against a table. It pulled at something inside him he didn't want touched. He had gone out that evening only to check the fence line. Only to move, breathe, exist in the numb space he had carved for himself since the world had gone quiet. But the mare's ribs told a different story, a story that refused to let him turn away. He muttered a curse into the wind, though it carried no heat. The mare swayed on her hooves, and instinct, not kindness, made him reach for her bridle. The leather was cracked. The buckle rusted. Someone had abandoned her long before the snow tried to finish the job. Easy, he murmured, though the word felt foreign in his throat. The mare answered by pressing her forehead lightly against his sleeve. Not trust exactly. More like surrender. Cole wasn't sure which felt heavier. The snow deepened around them as they walked, her steps dragging, his slow enough to match her dwindled strength. Each time she nudged the empty scoop hanging from his belt, it made that same hollow scrape, quiet, persistent, almost pleading. Cole tried not to hear it as anything more than a starving horse wanting food. He tried not to hear anything at all. But the sound kept finding him, nudging at the hollow places he'd buried deep. By the time the cabin came into view, the last light had thinned into gray. The world felt colder than the snow beneath his boots. He pushed open the barn door, the hinges groaning in a tired welcome. The mare hesitated, swaying once before stepping inside. He lit a lantern, its flame flickering against the rough boards. The mare lowered her head to the straw, exhaling a long, shuddering breath. Cole placed the empty scoop beside her. The wooden lip scraped the floor, soft but sharp in the stillness. That sound stayed with him as he crossed to the cabin. He wasn't halfway through unbuttoning his coat when he heard it again, fainter now, but still there. The hollow scrape of the feed scoop. And then the mare followed him inside. Cole woke before dawn, the cold still clinging to the walls like a stubborn ghost. The cabin held its breath, waiting for the first crack of fire to break the night. He lay there a moment, listening. Silence. Then, faint and hollow, the scrape of the feed scoop against the floorboards. He closed his eyes. Not again. But the sound came a second time, softer, as if the mare were testing whether he'd rise. He swung his legs over the side of the cot and felt the bite of cold through his socks. Every joint in his body protested. The stove stood dark and dead, but he moved toward it anyway, stacking kindling with numb fingers. One spark, a second spark, the third finally caught, coughing smoke before settling into a thin flame. Warmth crept slow, as if unsure it was welcome. The scoop scraped again. Cole stepped to the door and pulled it open. The mare stood in the threshold, her breath curling in the dim room, the emptiness in her eyes less hollow than last night. She wasn't asking. She was waiting. He sighed through his nose and nudged her gently aside so he could reach the small sack of oats. What was left barely filled his palm, but he poured the handful into the scoop anyway. The mare dipped her head, the soft rasp of her search echoing through the quiet. He let her eat. He didn't like what it made him feel. He grabbed his coat from the peg and stepped outside. The morning air stabbed through him. Snow still blanketed everything: fence posts, brush piles, the sloping trail that led to the creek. He walked just far enough to shake the stiffness out of his legs, far enough to be alone with the cold. But when he turned back, the mare stood at the doorway, watching him. She wasn't supposed to follow. He trudged up the steps and brushed past her, but she pressed close, her shoulder brushing his side. Warmth against cold, quiet against the morning's brittle hush. Inside again, she didn't wander. Instead, she planted herself near the stove and lowered her head, letting the small heat reach her. Cole crouched near her foreleg, checking her hooves, running a hand along the bone-sharp ribs. The mare breathed out slow, the exhale fogging the air between them. She didn't shy from his touch. That unsettled him more than if she had. The fire cracked, a small sharp note in the heavy quiet. He went to the counter and poured coffee into a tin cup. Bitter, overboiled, but warm. When he turned, she was still watching him. "You're not staying," he muttered. The mare blinked once, long and indifferent. He drank the coffee standing. A sudden noise outside snapped his attention, distant, faint, but sharp enough to raise the hairs on his arms. Hoofbeats, far off, then gone. He went still. The mare lifted her head, ears twitching. He waited for the sound to return. Nothing. Just wind skimming the snow. He forced himself to breathe again. But the quiet had changed. The piece he'd carved out for himself felt thinner, stretched too tight over something waiting to tear open. The mare nudged the scoop, making that hollow, searching scrape. It steadied him in a strange way. The sound felt familiar, almost grounding. He stepped closer and checked her again. Her mane, her flanks, the old bridle still hanging loose against her cheek. A small patch of ice had formed along her lower lip. He brushed it away with his thumb. She leaned into the touch. Warmth, quiet, slow trust. He didn't know what to do with any of it. By noon, the cabin held more heat than it had in weeks. He kept adding wood, kept finding excuses to move, to keep his hands busy. The mare shifted often, testing the edges of the room. Each soft step sounded too loud, too alive. She drank from the bucket he brought her. The steady slosh echoed in the small space. Cole sat on the floor, resting his back against the cot frame. He watched her without meaning to, watched her chest rise and fall, watched the tension in her neck ease little by little, watched the way she closed her eyes when the stove cracked again. He felt something thaw in him too, but he didn't name it. Late afternoon brought a draft through the doorframe, a thin knife of cold that cut across the room. He patched it with an old saddle blanket, but the wind kept testing the seams. The mare edged closer to him as the light faded. She nudged the scoop again, one soft scrape. He shook his head. No more. Not tonight. But she didn't back away. Instead, she lowered her head beside him, resting the weight of her jaw near his shoulder. Warmth pressed into the coldest part of the room. Cole froze, unsure if he should push her away. He didn't. Outside, night settled fast. The woods carried that strange, distant quiet, the kind that hinted something was moving beyond the dark, even if you couldn't hear it. The earlier hoofbeats returned to his mind, unwelcome and sharp. The mare's breath warmed the side of his neck. He reached up slowly, letting his hand rest against her cheek. Her skin twitched once, then settled. He thought to himself that he should put her back in the barn. Get her out of the house. Make some kind of boundary before she grew too comfortable. But the cabin was warm, and she was warmer. And the world outside felt like it was listening. Cole closed his eyes for a moment, letting the fire's glow wash over them both. The scoop lay on the floor beside them, a small wooden shell. The mare nudged it once more. A quiet scrape in the heart of the cabin. The first thaw. Cole woke to the sound of the mare shifting her weight, the soft thud of her hoof against the floor. Warm breath drifted across his cheek. The stove had burned low during the night, leaving the cabin wrapped in a blue cold. He rose slowly, joints stiff, breath fogging in the dim air. The mare watched him, ears flicking, waiting for the scrape of the feed scoop. He didn't give it to her yet, not until he had a fire going. The stove door groaned as he opened it. Old embers glowed weakly. He stirred them with the poker, coaxing a spark. The cold pushed back, stubborn, greedy. He added kindling, added more. Finally, a thin flame crawled through the wood, and the cabin began to breathe again. The mare nudged his shoulder. Cole didn't smile, but he did reach for the oats. Barely a handful left. He poured it into the scoop. The mare dipped her head, and the soft scrape filled the quiet. A fragile sound, familiar now, almost steadying. He stepped outside to fetch more wood before the warmth slipped away. Snow crusted the world in a harsh glitter. His boots tracked through it, each step snapping the silence. The sky held that pale winter light, more a memory than a sunrise. He hauled an armful of wood inside, shutting the door fast against the cold. The mare lifted her head as the warmth strengthened, her breath turning from sharp frost to gentle steam. She looked better than 2 days ago. Not good, but better. He knelt beside her, checking her legs, her hooves, the places where bones showed too clearly. "You're still here," he muttered. The mare lowered her head until her forehead brushed his shoulder. A quiet claim. He didn't push her away. Cole fixed a bucket of water and slid it across the floor. She drank greedily, the sloshing loud in the small room. Too loud. Too alive. He wasn't used to noise anymore. By midday, the snow thickened outside. A slow, heavy fall that made the windows look like frosted glass. Cole patched the cabin walls where the wind found seams. Nails, cloth, anything he could press into the cracks. The mare followed each hammer strike, ears twitching. When the wind rose suddenly, the cabin shuddered. The mare startled, stepping back hard enough to send the bucket skidding. Water splashed across the floor. Cole caught her reins just in time. "Easy," he said. "It's just wind." But his pulse didn't settle as quickly as hers. He wiped the spilled water with an old blanket. The mare watched him, as if waiting to understand his mood. When he tossed the blanket aside, she stepped close again, breathing warmth against his jaw. He wasn't ready for that. Not the closeness, not the trust. He stepped away and opened the door to clear his head. Cold knifed into him. The storm had swallowed the land. Trees blurred. Fence posts vanished. Wind carried a strange echo, like distant hooves muffled by snow. He listened hard. Nothing clear. Nothing he could name. But the unease from yesterday's feigned hoofbeats returned, settling like a stone in his chest. He shut the door fast. Inside, the mare shifted anxiously, picking up his tension. Her hoof tapped once against the floor, a small sound, sharp, alert. Cole moved to the window and brushed away frost with his sleeve. Snow. Only snow. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was moving through the storm. The mare closed the feed scoop again. A quiet scrape in the half-warm cabin. He turned away from the window and tried to focus on her instead. "All right," he said softly. "Let's see to your coat." He brushed her slow, steady strokes. Tangled hair, muddy patches, old scars. She stood still for all of it, leaning into the warmth the stove finally managed to hold. He felt something loosen in his chest with each pass of the brush. Something unfrozen, unwanted, but real. The mare lowered her head and bumped his shoulder again. Almost a thank you. He let his hand rest against her neck. Outside, the wind howled. "Hello," rising moan that scraped across the eaves. The cabin trembled once more. The mare tensed. Cole whispered, "You're safe." He hoped it was true. By late afternoon, the storm thickened into a white wall. No sound outside but the roar of wind. No light except the stove's glow, flickering along the mare's coat. Cole cooked beans on the stove, ate half, saved the rest. He set a small pot of warm mash for the mare. She ate slow, careful, the quiet scrape of the scoop marking each breath they shared. Night pressed in early. The fire cracked. The storm raged. Cole spread a blanket on the floor near the stove and eased down, exhaustion heavy on his bones. The mare stood watch for a long while. Then, with a soft sigh, she folded her legs and settled beside him, her warmth pushing back the cold. He didn't move away, He listened to her breathing, listened to the storm's fury, listened to the faint scrape of the scoop as she nudged it once before sleeping. Shelter for now. Struggle waiting outside, and something new thawing in the quiet between them. The storm eased by morning, but the cold clung to the world like a second skin. Cole stepped outside to shovel the drift from the doorway. Each push of the shovel sent a crisp scrape through the stillness. The mare watched him from the threshold, breath rolling out in slow white curls. He kept glancing at the tree line. Nothing moved, nothing stirred, but the memory of distant hoofbeats still clung to him like a bramble. Inside, warmth pooled low around the stove. Cole hung his coat near the heat and knelt beside the mare to check her again. She didn't flinch this time. She stood steady, her trust growing from a whisper into something he could feel against his palm. He ran his hand along her neck, down her shoulder, across her ribs. Then he felt it, raised skin beneath his fingertips. A scar. No, two scars overlapping. He brushed away the winter coat, clearing the hair with slow, deliberate strokes. The mare stiffened, not in fear, in memory. Cole leaned closer as the fire popped behind him. The first mark was an old brand, weathered, blurred by time and heat. The second brand had been burned right over it, the lines rushed and crooked, meant to bury what came before. He frowned. "Who did this to you?" he murmured. The mare shifted her weight. Her breath grew short, uneasy. The cabin felt smaller suddenly, warmer, but too close. Cole traced the lines again, careful, thoughtful. This wasn't ranch work. This was hiding. Someone had tried to erase her past. Someone who didn't want her recognized. The thought tightened something in his chest. He stood and stepped to the window. Snow lay deep and unbroken. No tracks. No intruders. Just an empty world pretending to be safe. But now he knew it wasn't. Behind him, the mare pawed the floor, one sharp strike that echoed like a warning. Cole turned, scanning her body again. More scars. Older ones. Marks of rope. Marks of the trail. Not a life of gentle hands. He fetched a damp cloth from the basin and returned to her side. The mare lowered her head, resigned, as if she had expected this pain to be a secret too long to stay buried. He cleaned around the branded patch, steam rising from her skin where the warmth touched it. The edges of the newer brand were jagged, careless. Whoever had done it hadn't been skilled or patient, and that scared him more. He warmed his hands near the stove before touching her again, the contrast between cold fingertips and her trembling heat like a thin bridge between past and present. She pressed her forehead softly against his shoulder. Warmth, weight, a plea. He didn't know how to answer it. He kept his voice low. "All right, I've got you. Let me look." The room held its breath with them. Outside, something shifted, snow sliding off the roof. A sudden thump. The mare jolted. Cole grabbed her halter, steadying her. Another reminder. The world beyond the cabin was still out there, still listening. When the tension eased, he returned to the brand. The older mark was nearly unreadable, but he could trace the faint shape of a ranch symbol, a curve, a crossbar, maybe a letter, but not enough to know its origin. The newer brand cut over it like a scar across a name. Cole exhaled, slow and troubled. This wasn't just a lost horse. Someone wanted her unclaimed, unfound. He wrapped a blanket around the mare's shoulders and let her rest. She folded down beside the stove, her breath steadying, the soft scrape of her hoof against the floor marking the rhythm of her settling. Cole stood a long moment, staring at the brand as the firelight flickered across it. The lines almost seemed to move, shifting between what was hidden and what was forced upon her. He didn't like mysteries. He especially didn't like mysteries with the smell of trouble baked into them. He poured coffee into his tin cup and sat near the stove. The mare watched him through half-lidded eyes, trusting him more than she should. "Whoever wanted to hide you," he whispered, "they might come looking." The wind answered with a long sigh against the cabin walls. Later, when he stepped outside to split more wood, he paused halfway through the first swing. Snow stretched silent across the yard. But something new, A line of faint impressions along the ridge. Maybe deer, maybe not. He tightened his grip on the axe. Inside, the mare whinnied softly, uneasy again. Cole returned to her and knelt by her side. His hand rested against her cheek, steadying both of them. The fire cracked. The cabin warmed. But the brand remained cold beneath his fingers. 2 marks. 2 stories. One buried deep enough that someone burned over it. The mare breathed out slow. Her breath touched his wrist. A small comfort. Cole knew what the scar meant now. She had belonged to someone once, and someone else had wanted to erase that truth. The mystery wasn't just in the mark. It was in the fear she carried, the trust she offered, and the footsteps that might, at any moment, return for her. Warmth closed around them again. But outside the cabin, the world felt colder than ever. Cole saddled up at first light, the cold biting through every seam as he tightened the cinch. The mare watched him from inside the cabin doorway, the branded scar hidden beneath her winter coat but burning in his mind like fresh iron. She wanted to follow. He couldn't let her. He stepped toward her and pressed a hand to her muzzle. Stay. Her breath warmed his fingers. Her eyes told him she didn't understand. Cole shut the door before she could push past him. The cold wrapped around him the moment he turned away, the kind that stung the teeth and cracked the air with each breath. He rode down the narrow trail toward the valley, snow crunching under the gelding's hoofs, sharp, rhythmic, the only noise in a world of white silence. The mare's empty feed scoop hung from his saddle horn. With each trot step, it tapped lightly against the leather. A hollow clack, a reminder he didn't ask for. By the time Cole reached town, smoke drifted from chimneys and the sun hovered weakly behind thin clouds. The saloon doors creaked when he stepped inside. Warmth hit him like a wave. Loud voices, the thrum of boots against the floor, the scrape of chairs. He wasn't used to noise anymore. He took a seat at the counter, shaking frost from his coat. The barkeep, Nolan Briggs, gave him a nod. "You're up early for a man who keeps to himself," Nolan said. Cole didn't answer right away. He watched the room, listening. A pair of ranch hands at the back table muttered low, eyes shifting toward him. One nudged the other and spoke a little louder. Baron Wexler's offering coin for a lost mare. Claimed she wandered off in the storm. Cole's stomach tightened. The second hand spat into the sawdust. "Horses don't just wander in weather like that." "No," the first said, "but Wexler's acting like she's made of gold." Cole's pulse throbbed. Warm cabin. The mare's branded scar. Those faint hoofbeats on the ridge. The threat was taking shape. Nolan poured him coffee, the steam rising in curls. "You hear about Wexler?" Cole kept his voice flat. "No." Nolan leaned closer. "Man came through here last night asking after a bay mare. Then, skittish. Said she slipped a rope. But Wexler, he don't look for animals out of kindness." Cole's jaw clenched. "So he came himself." "Briefly. Sent riders too. They checked the far ridge." Cole's grip tightened around the mug. The ridge near his homestead. The room grew louder behind him, boots stomping, someone laughing too hard, the piano starting a clumsy tune. Every sound clashed with a cold thought settling in his bones. Someone wanted the mare back. And they weren't far. Nolan lowered his voice. "You see anything strange on your land? Tracks? Riders?" Cole met his eyes. No. It was half a lie. Enough of one to taste bitter. Nolan sighed. "If I had a horse Wexler wanted, I'd keep it hidden. Or I'd send it far." Cole didn't answer. Cole saddled up at first light, the cold biting through every seam as he tightened the cinch. The mare watched him from inside the cabin doorway, the branded scar hidden beneath her winter coat but burning in his mind like fresh iron. She wanted to follow. He couldn't let her. He stepped toward her and pressed a hand to her muzzle. "Stay." Her breath warmed his fingers. Her eyes told him she didn't understand. Cole shut the door before she could push past him. The cold wrapped around him the moment he turned away, the kind that stung the teeth and cracked the air with each breath. He rode down the narrow trail toward the valley, snow crunching under the gelding's hooves, sharp, rhythmic, the only noise in a world of white silence. The mare's empty feed scoop hung from his saddle horn. With each trot step, it tapped lightly against the leather. A hollow clack, a reminder he didn't ask for. By the time Cole reached town, smoke drifted from chimneys and the sun hovered weakly behind thin clouds. The saloon doors creaked when he stepped inside. Warmth hit him like a wave. Loud voices, the thrum of boots against the floor, the scrape of chairs. He wasn't used to noise anymore. He took a seat at the counter, shaking frost from his coat. The barkeep, Nolan Briggs, gave him a nod. "You're up early for a man who keeps to himself," Nolan said. Cole didn't answer right away. He watched the room, listening. A pair of ranch hands at the back table muttered low, eyes shifting toward him. One nudged the other and spoke a little louder. "Baron Wexler's offering coin for a lost mare. Claims she wandered off in the storm." Cole's stomach tightened. The second hand spat into the sawdust. "Horses don't just wander in weather like that." "No," the first said, "but Wexler's acting like she's made of gold." Cole's pulse throbbed. Warm cabin. The mare's branded scar. Those faint hoofbeats on the ridge. The threat was taking shape. Nolan poured him coffee, the steam rising in curls. "You hear about Wexler?" Cole kept his voice flat. "No." Nolan leaned closer. "Man came through here last night asking after a bay mare. Then, skittish, said she slipped a rope. But Wexler, he don't look for animals out of kindness." Cole's jaw clenched. "So he came himself?" "Briefly. Sent riders too. They checked the far ridge." Cole's grip tightened around the mug. The ridge near his homestead. The room grew louder behind him, boots stomping, someone laughing too hard, the piano starting a clumsy tune. Every sound clashed with the cold thought settling in his bones. Someone wanted the mare back. And they weren't far. Nolan lowered his voice. "You see anything strange in your land? Tracks? Riders?" Cole met his eyes. "No." It was half a lie. Enough of one to taste bitter. Nolan sighed. "If I had a horse Wexler wanted, I'd keep it hidden. Or I'd send it far." Cole didn't answer. Cole spent the next morning mending the fence line, though the wire didn't truly need it. He needed the motion, the distraction, the cold bit at his face, the wind stinging like small, sharp truths. The mare watched from the porch, her breath drifting in slow clouds. She didn't stray from the cabin now. Not after the rider on the ridge. Not after the rumor in town. Cole hammered a staple into the post. The metal rang out, thin and lonely. A sound that belonged to a man trying to hold things together. Snow crunched behind him. He turned. No one there. Just drifting flakes sliding from a branch. But his hand still hovered near the revolver on his belt. He finished the fence and headed back toward the homestead. The mare followed his movement with her eyes, ears forward, waiting for him to step inside the circle of warmth again. Inside, the cabin breathed heat. The stove crackled, and the mare found her place beside it, lowering herself to the floor with a soft grunt. Cole brushed her coat, the rhythmic strokes calming them both, though neither would admit it. His hand paused at the branded scar. The mare tensed. Warm room. Cold memory. Silence full of questions. Cole poured himself coffee, its steam softening the edges of the room. The quiet felt full, not empty, like something living inside the walls with them. Then came a knock. Not on the door. On the world around them. Hoofbeats. Slow. Deliberate. Not the aimless wandering of a lost traveler. The mare rose fast, ears pinned, breath sharp. Cole stepped to the window and lifted the curtain's edge with 2 fingers. A lone rider approached. Dark coat. Heavy gloves. Hat pulled low. The kind of man who moved like he owned the horizon. Wexler's man. Maybe Wexler himself. Cole's pulse thudded once, hard. The rider stopped 20 yards from the cabin. His horse stamped at the snow. He didn't dismount. Instead, he raised a hand in a slow, controlled gesture. An invitation. a warning. Both at once. Cole opened the door but didn't step out. Cole rushed in, swirling around his boots. The mare stood behind him, breath trembling against his shoulder. "You Cole Avery?" the rider called. Cole didn't answer. "I'm looking for a mare," the man continued. Scarred, thin, might have wandered this way. Cole leaned his shoulder against the doorframe. "Haven't seen her." The rider's mouth twitched. Not a smile, not anger, something colder. "You sure?" His voice dragged across the snow like a dull blade. Cole's hand rested lightly on the doorframe. Not on the gun. Not yet. "Storm took a lot of animals," he said. "Plenty didn't make it." "That so?" the rider replied. "Funny thing. This one's worth more than most. Worth coming a long way for." Cole said nothing. The rider shifted in the saddle. Leather creaked. Hooves cracked through a frozen crust. The noise felt too sharp in the wide quiet. Cole kept his face calm, but the mare behind him pressed her forehead deeper into his back. Her fear told the rider everything Cole didn't speak. The man's eyes narrowed. "You're awful protective of your doorstep." Cole straightened. "You're awful far from your employer's land." The rider's jaw tightened at that. "Wexler'll be coming through tomorrow," he said. "You see anything, hear anything, you best tell him. He don't take kindly to secrets." Cole didn't blink. "Neither do I." The cold swallowed the space between them. Finally, the rider tugged the reins and turned back toward the ridge. "Tomorrow," he repeated, voice low. Cole watched until the dark coat vanished behind the hill. Only then did he close the door. The mare pressed against him, shaking, not from cold but something deeper. He rested a hand on her neck, felt her breath on his wrist. The branded scar pulsed beneath his thumb like a heartbeat buried under winter fur. Warm cabin. Cold world. Noise fading into silence. He paced once, twice, trying to think. The mare nudged the feed scoop lying near the stove. A hollow scrape cut the quiet. Cole stared at the door. "They found us," he whispered. The fire cracked. The mare breathed. Outside, the wind shifted direction, carrying the scent of snow and men who wouldn't stop searching. Cole knew what tomorrow meant. The antagonist was no longer a rumor. He was riding straight toward them. Cole rose before dawn, though he hadn't slept. The cabin held a tight, uneasy warmth, the kind that clung to the skin rather than settled into the bones. The mare paced near the stove, hooves tapping a quiet, nervous rhythm on the floorboards. She knew. Animals always did. Cole poured coffee into a tin cup, his hands unsteady. The window held a faint glow, morning pushing against a long night, but the cold outside felt heavy, waiting. He stepped toward the glass and brushed the frost aside. Tracks in the snow. Fresh. More than one horse. The mare snorted sharply, ears pinned. Her breath hit the cold with a hiss. Cole lowered the curtain and inhaled slow, steady. Today was not a surprise. Yesterday's rider had made that clear. Wexler was coming. The mare nudged the feed scoop again. The wooden lip scraped the floor with that hollow, aching sound. The first noise of the day. The one that set every nerve on edge. Cole holstered his revolver, though he hated the weight of it. He had chosen quiet years ago, chosen solitude over violence. But violence had a habit of finding men who tried to step away from it. A knock sounded. Hard. Confident. Not asking, announcing. The mare froze. Her muscles trembled beneath her coat. Cole moved to the door and cracked her just enough to see. Baron Wexler stood there, a broad man wrapped in a thick wool coat, boots spotless despite the snow. His eyes were the pale gray of unshaded ice. Behind him waited 3 riders, rifles slung loose, horses stamping in the cold. Wexler removed his hat with a slow, controlled motion. "Morning, Mr. Avery." Cole didn't respond. Wexler smiled without warmth. "I hear a mare came through this valley. Starved. Hurt. Worthless to most men. But not to me." Cole kept the door nearly closed. "Haven't seen her." Wexler's smile thinned. That's what my man said you told him. Funny thing about honesty, though, it changes shape under pressure. He stepped closer. The horses behind him snorted, steam rising in sharp bursts. Inside, the mare shifted her weight. One hoof tapped once against the floor, a soft knock against a soft world. Wexler heard it. What was that? He asked. Cole didn't flinch. This is an old cabin. Wood moves. Wexler's gaze stayed fixed on the crack in the doorway. Open it wider. Cole didn't. Wexler clicked his tongue. You know who I am. I do. Then you know I don't appreciate being lied to. Cole's jaw tightened. You're trespassing. Wexler leaned in, his breath a cloud of cold arrogance. Trespassing, he repeated, amused. Son, the valley bends to man who can afford to shape it. The mare made another sound, a low, anxious whinny from behind Cole's shoulder. Wexler's eyes sharpened like glass edges. There. Cole stepped fully into the doorway, blocking the view. Wexler's smile died. Move aside. No. The word hung between them, fragile as frost but unbreakable. Micro-tension rippled through the snow as the riders shifted their reins. Horses stamped, metal clattered, breath steamed. Wexler didn't blink. That mare is mine, stolen from my property, scarred by rustlers, half killed in the storm. I want her back. You branded over an older mark, Cole said. Someone else had it her first. Wexler's jaw flexed. That's none of your concern. It is now. A long silence stretched, not peaceful, predatory. Wexler lowered his voice. You're protecting something that belongs to me. Cole didn't move. She belongs to whoever she chooses. Wexler laughed once, sharp and empty. Is that what you think horses are? Choosers? His expression hardened. I'm giving you a chance, Avery. Bring her out. I'll forget you lied. I'll forget you tried to hide her. The mare nudged the feed scoop again. A hollow scrape, too loud this time. Wexler heard it clearly. He stepped forward fast. Cole kicked the door shut. A heavy fist slammed against the wood. Then another. Then silence. Wexler's voice carried through the cracks. You've made your decision. Cole backed away from the door, pulse running hot under cold skin. The mare pressed into him, shaking now. He knelt beside her, placing a steady hand on her neck. It's all right. But it wasn't. Outside, hooves churned through snow as the riders circled the cabin. Wexler's voice floated from the far side. We'll be back at dusk, with more men, and the law behind us. Cole felt the words settle like stones in his chest. The riders moved off, hooves fading into the valley. Cole reclaimed the silence. Only the fire crackled. Only the mare breathed. Only the scoop scraped once as she nudged it with her muzzle. Pressure at the door. Pressure on the heart. And a storm coming that no wall could keep out. Cole spent the hours before dusk pacing the cabin, the warmth from the stove barely touching him. The mare stood close, her breath brushing his sleeve, ears twitching at every creak of settling wood. Snow whispered against the windows. The world outside was preparing for something. He felt it too. When the shadows lengthened, Cole opened the chest beneath his cot. Inside lay the things he'd sworn off: oilcloth, a box of cartridges, a rifle that carried more past than steel. He touched it like greeting an old ghost. The mare shifted uneasily, sensing the change in him. I know, Cole murmured. I didn't want this. He checked the rifle. The metal felt colder than the air. He loaded each round slow. Careful. No sound except the click of brass sliding home. Outside, wind swept hard across the valley. Snow lifted in spirals. Poof beats began to form inside that wind, distant, then closer, then unmistakable. The mare lifted her head, muscles going tight. Cole stepped to the window. Lanterns bobbed between the trees. 6 riders. Wexler in front. His voice carried before he reached the yard. Avery, bring her out. The mare pressed against Cole's shoulder. warmth against rising cold. He set the rifle aside and unbarred the door. Wexler waited 20 yards away, boots shining like polished spide. "Move aside," he said. "You've delayed this long enough." Cole stepped onto the porch, breath turning to frost. "Not giving her to you." Wexler's smile was a thin crack in stone. "Then let's settle this proper." He signaled to his men. 2 riders fanned out toward the barn. Another dismounted, scanning tracks in the snow. The mare whinnied inside the cabin, sharp, afraid. Cole's chest tightened. But he didn't reach for the gun yet. Instead, he walked to the porch edge with something else in his hand, the iron-branded pried off the barn wall earlier. The one from the elder mark on the mare's skin. The true brand, faded but unmistakable. He held it up so every man could see. "She wasn't yours," Cole said. "Not first. Not ever." Wexler's jaw twitched. "Old marks don't matter." "They do to the law," Cole said. "And to the men watching from behind you." Wexler stiffened. The riders glanced at each other. One spat into the snow. The other narrowed his eyes at the overlapping brands. "You said wrestlers stole her," one muttered. "Said you found her abandoned." Wexler snapped. "Shut your mouth." Cole didn't. She belonged to the widow on Cold Spring Road, the one Wexler drove out. She marked the mare as hers. New brand was just a cover. The wind cut through the yard like a blade. Silence followed. Wexler's men shifted, no longer certain of which side they stood on. Wexler's face darkened. "You think truth means anything out here?" "It does," Cole said, "when men are watching their own paymaster lie." Wexler's hand went to his revolver. Micro-tension snapped taut. Cole dropped the old brand in the snow. "I don't want blood," he said quietly. "But you will not take her." Wexler drew. Cole moved first. Not for the rifle. For the mare. He turned, barreling through the door as a bullet smacked into the frame behind him. The mare bolted toward him, terrified. He grabbed her halter, pulling her to the far side of the cabin. Another shot cracked through the room, splintering wood. Noise. Cold. Panic. Cole shoved the mare behind the stove for what little cover it offered. He grabbed the rifle, racked around, and crouched low. The next bullet punched a hole near his head. He leaned out, fired once. The shot echoed down the valley, violent and final. One rider toppled from his horse, hitting the snow with a sickening thud. Chaos erupted. "Hold your fire," one rider yelled, but Wexler was past hearing. He fired into the cabin again and again, each shot daring into the walls like claws. Cole waited for the lull, counted the seconds between blasts, listened. Silence. Then a click. An empty cylinder. Cole rose, fired twice. Both shots found their mark, one striking Wexler's gun arm, sending the revolver flying, the second hitting the ground near his boots, forcing him back. Wexler cursed, clutching his arm. Cole stepped out onto the porch slowly, rifle aimed. Snow swirled around him, the world reduced to cold breath and sharp echoes. "It's over," Cole said. Wexler staggered backward. His remaining men watched, uncertain. Cole lowered the rifle, not in mercy, but in final judgment. "Take him and go. Don't come back." Wexler glared with hatred sharp enough to cut the air. "You'll pay for this." "No," Cole said. "You will." One rider dismounted, grabbed Wexler's good arm, and hauled him away. The others followed, retreating into the drifting white. Their hoofbeats faded into the valley. Silence settled again. A deep, exhausted silence. Cole turned back toward the cabin. The mare stepped out carefully, trembling, her breath warm against the icy air. She touched her muzzle to his hand, slow, grateful. Warmth against cold. Life against violence. Quiet against the storm he'd unleashed. Cole exhaled. The stand was over. But something deeper had been set right. Cole didn't sleep that night. The cabin held a thin, uneasy warmth, but his body stayed wired, listening for hooves that never came. The mare dozed near the stove, breath rising in slow curls, the branded scar hidden under her coat like a buried truth. Outside, snow fell softly. Quiet, forgiving. Too quiet. He rose before dawn and stepped outside to scan the ridge. The world was empty. No lanterns, no riders, no sign of Wexler's men. Only the cold, only the hush. He still didn't trust it. When he came back inside, the mare lifted her head, ears forward, eyes alert. She stepped toward him and nudged the feed scoop where it lay beside the stove. The hollow scrape echoed in the morning stillness. The sound anchored him again. The same sound that had pulled him to her in the beginning. The sound that had become a thread through every moment since. He knelt and brushed her shoulder, felt the tremor beneath her ribs, felt the heat of her breath as she leaned into him. "You made it," he whispered. But the mystery still pressed on him. The brand, the overlapping marks, the fear in her eyes every time a stranger approached. He had answers to find. He saddled the gelding and rode toward town, keeping to the thickest trees. Snow crackled under the hooves, breaking the silence like brittle bones. The mare watched from the doorway as he left, worrying the tilt of her head. He didn't like leaving her alone. But the truth needed uncovering. The valley was muted by snow when he arrived in town. Smoke drifted lazily from the saloon chimney. The place felt smaller than usual, as if bracing for bad news. Inside, warmth struck him hard. Boots on floorboards, cards slapping tables, voices weaving together in rough harmony, noise clawing at the edges of his solitude. Nolan Briggs looked up the moment Cole walked in. His expression tightened. "You look half frozen and half haunted." "Coffee," Cole said. Nolan poured without questions, sliding the cup across. "Wexler came through again after you left yesterday. Riled up, bleeding, said a squatter shot at him." Cole took a long drink. "What did the town say?" "The town's tired of him," Nolan said. "Been tired for years." Cole set the cup down. "I need to ask you something." Nolan's eyebrows rose. "I'm listening." "Widow out by Cold Spring Road," Cole said. "The one Wexler drove off her land." Nolan's jaw clenched. "Mary Dunlin." Cole nodded once. "Tell me about her." Nolan leaned against the counter, arms crossed. The noise behind them faded into background thrum. "Her husband died 5 winters ago," Nolan said. "Left her with a small piece of land and a mare she loved more than anything. Wexler wanted that land. Wanted her, some whispered. She refused him. He pushed back harder." Cole felt a cold coil tightening inside him. He cut her water rights, sent men to inspect her fences, brought judges from 2 counties over. Nolan shook his head. "She fought as long as she could. Then the mare went missing. Vanished. Mary left the valley the next day." Cole swallowed. "Where'd she go?" "No one knows," Nolan said softly. "She didn't trust many. And after that Mary disappeared, she stopped trusting anyone." Cole's stomach knotted. Nolan studied him. "Why the sudden questions? You telling me you found?" Cole's eyes gave the answer. Nolan's breath hitched. "Good Lord. Then everything she said was true." Cole stepped back, feeling the weight of it settled into him. Mary's Mary. Mary's loss. Wexler's theft hidden under a rushed new brand. The past was no longer a mystery. It was a wound. Cole finished his coffee and pushed out into the cold. Halfway home, he saw a shape on the trail ahead. Someone wrapped in a heavy shawl, boots half buried in snow, leading a small mule. The figure trudged with slow, deliberate steps, fighting the wind. Cole reined in. "You need help?" The figure looked up, revealing a woman's face, thin, tired, eyes like someone who'd weathered too many nights alone. "I'm looking for Cole Avery," she said. Cole stiffened. "You found him." "I'm Mary Dunlin." The air froze around him. Cole slid off the gelding. "You shouldn't be out here alone." "I had to come," she said, voice tight with something old and painful. "A rider came to the boarding house in 3 Pines. Said Wexler was searching for a mare again. A mare he wanted hidden. I knew it had to be her. Cole's breath fogged between them. I have your horse. Mary's eyes filled before she spoke. You kept her alive? Cole nodded. Mary bowed her head, shoulders shaking once. Then she straightened. Take me to her. They rode the rest of the way in silence, broken only by wind cutting through branches and the distant creak of ice settling on the ridge. When the homestead came into view, the mare stood outside the cabin, ears pricked, breath rising like soft white signals into the cold. Mary slid off the mule before Cole stopped fully. She stepped forward slowly, as if approaching a memory she wasn't sure was real. The mare lifted her head, paused, snorted once. Then she moved, fast, desperate, closing the distance between them with a sound Cole had never heard from her before. A whinny raw with recognition. Mary fell against the mare's neck, arms wrapping around her, crying into the winter coat. The mare pressed her head into Mary's chest, trembling like a child finally found. Warmth. Noise. Reunion. Cole stepped back, giving them space. Snow fell quiet around them, soft as breath. Mary stroked the mare's neck, fingers finding the overlapping brand. She froze. He did this to her? Cole nodded. He tried to hide her, tried to hide what he took. Mary closed her eyes, grief cutting through her voice. She was the last piece of my husband's life. Wexler knew that. The mare nudged her, gentle and insistent. Mary stroked her again and whispered, I'm here. I'm here now. A long silence settled over the homestead, warm despite the cold, full despite the quiet. Mary turned to Cole. You risked everything to protect her. Why? Cole looked at the mare, at her scar, at the trust she'd given him without conditions. She found me, he said, and I wasn't going to let anyone take her again. Mary nodded, tears caught in the light. You saved more than just a horse. The mare nudged the feed scoop lying near Cole's boot. A soft scrape, familiar, grounding, no longer hollow. The truth stood in the open now. The mystery revealed. The past reclaimed. And the three of them stood together in the cold morning light, warming a story that had been waiting far too long to be told. The morning after Mary arrived felt different in the valley. Not safer, but lighter, like the cold had lost a little of its bite. The mare grazed near the porch, her breath drifting in soft clouds. Mary brushed her coat in slow circles, humming a tune that seemed to rise from somewhere old and tender. The melody slipped through the cold air like a thread stitching warmth into the day. Cole stacked wood by the cabin wall, pretending he wasn't listening. Pretending he didn't feel that same warmth pulling at him. The mare lifted her head and nudged Mary's shoulder. A quiet bond restored. A life returned. Mary whispered something into the mare's mane. The horse flicked her ears as if answering. Cole paused in his stacking. He wasn't used to voices in his yard. Wasn't used to anyone sharing his silence. He carried the last pieces of wood inside. The stove gave off a steady heat, filling the cabin with comfort instead of tension. The mare's feed scoop lay on the floor near the door, no longer a hollow reminder of hunger, but part of a home. When Mary stepped inside behind him, snow melting on her shawl, she paused at the sight of it. You kept her alive with that, she said softly. Cole shrugged. Just a scoop. Mary smiled faintly. You know it's more than that. The mare stepped in too, brushing past Cole and lowering her head to the scoop. She nudged it. The same wooden scrape echoed lightly against the floor. But this time, the sound wasn't desperate. Not hollow. Not lonely. A sound full of memory. Full of gratitude. Full of possibility. Cole felt warmth rise in his chest before he knew what to do with it. Mary crouched beside the mare, touching the overlapping brand. She's strong, Mary whispered. Stronger than what was done to her. Cole sat on the edge of the cot, hands resting against his knees. You gonna take her back with you? Wherever you've been staying? Mary didn't answer at first. She ran her fingers along the mare's neck, feeling the steady breath, the steady trust. No, she said finally. I came to bring her home. But this This looks more like home than where I've been. Cole blinked. You're thinking of staying? If it's all right. The question hung between them, gentle as falling snow. Cole wasn't a man used to company. Not used to shared warnings, shared warmth, shared hopes. But when he looked at Mary, then at the mare, he saw something that steadied him. I think it is, he said. The mare nudged the scoop again, as if punctuating the moment. Later that day, Cole and Mary walked the property line. Snow sparkled like glass shards under the noon sun. The air carried the smell of pine and distant chimney smoke. Mary wrapped her shawl tighter against the cold. You think Wexler's done? Cole shook his head. Men like him don't quit easy. A flicker of tension tightened the air between them. A reminder. A shadow of the storm that had already passed. But Cole glanced at the mare following behind them, her steps steady, her ears relaxed, and felt the weight shift. He won't risk coming back without cause, Cole said. Town saw his lies. His riders saw the truth. He's not the man he was 2 days ago. Mary exhaled, letting some of her fear drift away with a breath. They continued the walk. Snow crunching. Wind humming low through the trees. The mare's quiet steps keeping pace with them. When they reached the crest overlooking the valley, Mary stopped. This was your world, she said. Quiet. Safe. And I brought trouble to your door. Cole shook his head. You didn't bring it. It was already looking. Mary studied him, his worn coat, his guarded posture, the way he watched the horizon. You remind me of her, Mary said. Of the mare. Both of you carried scars you didn't want anyone to see. Cole let the words settle. They landed deeper than he expected. They returned to the cabin by dusk. The mare settled near the porch, eyes half closed, breath warm against the cold. Inside, the stove glowed bright. Mary warmed soup on the iron pot. The smell filled the small space with comfort, pushing away the ache of the past days. Cole leaned against the doorframe, watching her stir. You cook better than I do, he said. Mary glanced over her shoulder. It's not hard to be better than nothing. He huffed a quiet laugh, a sound he hadn't made in months. They ate together at the small table, 2 bowls, 1 lantern, the quiet rhythm of spoons against tin. Outside, night settled soft against the cabin walls. After supper, Mary opened a small satchel she'd brought. Inside was a folded scrap of cloth, a piece of her husband's old saddle blanket. This belonged to her, Mary said, laying it gently across the mare's back. She'd rest her head on it when the world felt too big. The mare lowered her head, nuzzling Mary's hand. Warmth. Recognition. Legacy. Cole watched quietly, feeling something in him shift, like snow melting off a roof, slow but certain. Later, he stepped outside alone, breathing in the cold night air. Stars scattered across the sky like sparks tossed from a giant fire. The valley lay still, untouched. Behind him, the cabin door opened. Mary stepped out, shawl wrapped tight. The mare followed her, brushing against her side. Cole looked at them, woman and horse framed in lamplight, and something settled deep inside him. A life rebuilt. A family forming. A future thawing out of winter's grip. Mary moved closer. You don't have to face things alone anymore, she said. The mare nudged the feed scoop hanging from Mary's hand. The wooden scrape rang through the cold, soft, warm, almost musical. The same sound that once marked hunger, pain, loneliness. Now it was a sound of home. Cole let out a long, steady breath. The cabin behind them glowed with warmth. The valley whispered its quiet approval. And winter felt less like an ending, more like a beginning. Legacy wasn't something you found. It was something you protected. Something you chose. Something that chose you back. Cole reached out and rested his hand on the mare's neck. Welcome home, he murmured. Mary smiled softly. And for the first time in years, the night felt warm. If this story stirred a memory or two, saddle up with us again. Hit subscribe and help keep these old frontier tales alive. Out here, every name, Every trail, every sunset still matters. So till we meet again, friend, keep your hat tipped to the past and your heart pointed west.